The creation of the modern school system back in 1892 was designed for students to enter the industrial workforce. Sadly, the school system is still structured the same way. But with new technologies over the past several decades, the landscape of work and opportunities is far beyond what many parents know exists or is even available to them.
How did we get here?
What are we going to do?
Where does it start? It should start at an early age. Even at age 7, children already have dreams or ambitions for future careers. Our education system needs to adequately help our youth identify and develop their unique abilities. Studies show that how we're educating and preparing our students is not meeting their needs and the needs of employers. So we started to imagine, what if our kids had a modern curriculum that was capable of supporting the development of their unique skills, strengths, interests, and values, effectively developing the necessary knowledge to help them prepare for the real-world opportunities and choices they will make, socially, educationally, and occupationally, thereby helping the teacher provide the most valuable support in guiding young people in their future, instilling hope in everything they do. Through a program known as the World of Work, we connect families, industry, teachers, and students. We make learning relevant through work-based simulations and career development tools that help students begin to understand their connection to the world of work.
The world of work, based on the RIASEC framework, at a minimum, each child, each grade, each year will have exposure and experience with 6 types of careers. So by the time they graduate 8th grade, it'll be 54.
We believe that every child has unique strengths, interests, and values that are needed in the world. And when we unleash their awareness of their unique talents, we create hope in each and every child so that they'll know that there's a unique place in the world for each and every one of them.
What WOW has done is it has upped the level of student engagement in a classroom. So if you had the magic potion to make a classroom where 35 kids were all excited about what they were doing, why wouldn't you want to use it?
The World of Work initiative helps educators make learning relevant by connecting what happens in the work world for students starting at kindergarten and continuing through their senior years.
I love the concept the world of work embodies, that all work has value. When you understand that all work has value, you begin to understand that all people have value. And their interests are as valuable as another person's interest, and their skill set is as valuable as another person's skill set. And there's a place for everyone in our community.
You know, as a police chief, I see such great value in sharing this information and sharing these programs to our youth, because that's the future of our community, that's the future of our citizenship, and to be honest with you, that's probably going to be the future of my police department.
And the World of Work is a program that really encompasses and incorporates what the future is going to look like. It gives the opportunity for students to learn about their future as well as these jobs that they're looking at.
We're using World of Work to learn about jobs that we can do in the future.
The World of Work helps you find your future job. One of my favorite jobs to do is being a theme park engineer.
So what's happening right now? As school systems graduate students who have effectively identified their strengths, interests, and values, we will begin to see individuals, families, companies, and communities transformed. We will see these citizens engaging with sound financial well-being and a solid path to seamlessly transition from school to career. To discover more about how World of Work helps move our communities from scarcity to abundance, call 877-717-2474. Area representatives are ready to help you realize the potential of making long-lasting life changes with every student.
Those are real students, not actors. I'm David Miasher. I'm the superintendent of the Cajon Valley Union School District. Very happy to be back here at ASU GSV and have lots of friends here in the audience. We got to start our day with school visits in our classrooms and really connect with our own students, and saw some of you there with us. Thanks for joining us. So I'm going to share a little bit about the why before I turn it over to our Chief Innovation and Engagement Officer But short story, our lunch keynote speaker, Jose Saavedra, who gave a talk on bullying, he gave a talk like that at a TEDx event, and his slides froze on screen. How many of you have had technology fail at a conference? He just stopped, and then he went and kept on going without his slides and finished delivering the talk. That was last year as a first grader, but anyways, happy to be with you. This is the research of Dr. Raj Chetty, and what he studied is over time, basically a child's income is a direct reflection of what they can possibly make in terms of income. And it's pretty consistent over time. So basically, if your parents are affluent, then your chances of being affluent are like. If you're living in poverty, then your chances of getting out of poverty, probably not that much. That's not surprising, but what's surprising here, next slide please, is that the fading American dream shows that millennials now, their chances to out-earn their parents is gone. And so when you think about why is it that children can't make more than their parents today, it's really a mismatch between the modern school system, I would say not just K-12, but K-16, and the world of work. Next slide, please. And play.
What do you want to be when you grow up? Now, adults are hoping for answers like, I want to be an astronaut, or I want to be a neurosurgeon. You adults and your imaginations.
And this is Logan LaPlante. He gave a TEDx talk about 6 years ago. And basically, he shared, when I grow up, I want to be happy. And when I saw this talk 6 years ago, I thought, how profound is that? Shouldn't schools be a place where we cultivate happy kids? And that really resonates with our lunchtime keynote. Next slide, please. And play.
So it seems to me when adults say, what do you want to be when you grow up? They just assume that you'll automatically be happy and healthy. But maybe that's not the case. Go to school, go to college, get a job, get married, boom. Then you'll be happy, right? We don't seem to make learning how to be happy and healthy a priority in our schools. It's separate from schools. And for some kids, it doesn't exist at all.
For some kids, it doesn't exist at all. And so the slides that we saw this afternoon about stress and anxiety, if you look at our modern school system, that's what it's designed to produce. So we thought, let's reimagine that and make our schools a place where kids learn to be happy, engage in healthy relationships, and start on a path to gainful employment. Next slide, please. This is the research of Sean Aker, which supports the slides from the Yale School of Social Emotional Learning. Next slide, please, and play.
The modern world, we'd find happiness as pleasure, which is very short-lived and then it's over, which is not worth us spending even 10 minutes talking about here today. What I want to talk about is what the ancient Greeks defined it as. They defined happiness as the joy you feel moving towards your potential. I want to stop momentarily because that definition actually changes the pursuit of happiness.
Next slide, please. So if happiness is on the other side of success, your brain never gets there. When you pass the test, when you get out of 8th grade, when you make it to high school, when you graduate from high school, when you get into college. So we have these kids chasing these lofty goals, but they never reach happiness because they don't learn to be happy in the present. Next slide, please. So this is one of our favorite quotes. There are two educations. One should teach one how to live, and one should teach one how to make a living. And so that's what we've tried to realign our school system to do. We have a very courageous school board who has allowed us to invest our resources into developing our own content and curriculum with several of our partners here in the room today. Next slide, please. And so these 5 superheroes, are there any governing board members here from Cajon Valley? Jill Bardo and Tamara Otero. They've allowed us this opportunity to go off book and create something new, and we're going to share that with you today. Next slide, please. This is fun. The next slide, please. Clicker. So this is a little bit about us. I'm going to show you a 90-second snapshot of the event that Jose Saavedra gave his talk at, TEDx Kids at El Cajon. Next slide, please. And play.
Why is kindness important? Kindness is important because being kind is the foundation and the key to peace. And we need to build peace. Our world is really one big family.
Hope is where we are. Our journey had just begun.
bully's like a big grizzly bear, so when you see him, play dead. No, seriously, ignore the bully.
Always remember to believe in yourself and find the balance in your life.
Do what you believe in and never ever give up fighting for your rights.
So remember, you're awesome and cool.
Next slide, please. And so our governing board allowed us to rewrite our mission statement, very simply said, making our community the best place to live, work, play, and raise a family. And our vision statement, next slide, please. Happy kids in healthy relationships on a path to gainful employment. So that required us to reinvent our assessments. What are we actually measuring? If it's not language, arts, math, and science at a fixed point in time, how do you measure happiness? How do you measure relationships? And how do you measure a path to gainful employment? So we're utilizing research tools and these resources we're going to share with you today to do that. Next slide, please. One more. To close the gap between education and the workforce. Next slide, please. And then click 4 times. So what if every child learned computer science, learned to give a TED Talk, learned to build relationships starting in kindergarten, and we track that growth over time, even beyond when they leave us at 12th grade? And to talk about our keynote initiative is the World of Work. Ed Hidalgo started his career in personnel and human resources, worked for Manpower, was the second largest staffing agency in the world, I think, and I think we have Phil Blair here, and Peter Kalstrom, San Diego Workforce Partnership here. And then he went to Qualcomm, where for 20 years he helped them develop career practices for their employees, and then translated that work to students. And when we met Ed at Qualcomm, we thought, this is what school needs to look like every day for our kids. How can we bring relevance into the kids and have kids actually start to hope for a better future? So please welcome Ed Hidalgo, our Chief Innovation Engagement Officer.
Thanks. Thank you, David. Next slide, please. Thanks. I went to Qualcomm and hiring talent teams. I worked for Phil Blair. I sit on the board of the Workforce Partnership, and it was amazing hiring talent all over the globe. I imported labor from all over the world. India, China, Canada, all over the world. In fact, half of the hires that we hired, we brought from somewhere else to San Diego, and that was a problem. One of the dream jobs that I had at the bottom left is that after doing all of this career development work for adults, I had the opportunity to start a career counseling practice for 15,000 employees at Qualcomm, Berkeley, Stanford, MIT, Georgia Tech, Virginia Tech, masters, PhDs that didn't know how to manage their careers. You know, engineers are pretty expensive. And if your engineers aren't engaged in their work, are you getting value out of those engineers? Are you getting innovation and productivity, et cetera? So we implemented a career development practice that focused on helping our engineers discover their unique strengths, interests, and values. Who am I? What do I like to do? And where might I like to do it? And imagine that we studied that over 3 years, and we saw their performance change. And we thought, what if we did this for young people? So we did this with 3,500 young people and veterans all throughout San Diego. And then we said, well, what if we could start a makerspace? And Qualcomm was crazy enough to allow us to start a makerspace. We saw 15,000 students over 3 years. We ran school every single day at Qualcomm, top floor of one of our buildings. And what do I get when these students come up to the top floor? We thought we were going to Qualcomm Stadium. So the question becomes, how does a child aspire to a career they don't know exists? Huge fail. Right in our own backyard, 25 minutes away. These children don't understand that the world's largest fabless semiconductor company is right in their own backyard. Fail. But we've been failing at that for years, many years. And so next slide, please. So I ask you as educators, and you can build out the slide, please, if you don't mind, where does career development fit in your curriculum map? What research is driving your career development? Because we talk a lot about reskilling. We talk a lot about workforce development. But do we really talk about career development? And what does that mean? How many of you have read the research? How many of you studied the individuals who created the research around this? Next slide, please. So when I met Dr. Miyashiro, he came to the Think a Bit lab, and this was the work that we were driving for our own employees. We weren't making up this work on our own. because the work's been around for decades, almost a century in some cases, and certainly most of you know Bandura's work. Maybe you've never heard of social cognitive career theory. Hopefully you've heard of strengths-based practice, but it was so interesting that when I invited those 15,000 individuals to Think a Bit Lab, we also brought 5,000 adults who were superintendents and principals, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and they didn't know what I was talking about. They knew the standards, Common Core, and everything else that goes along with that, but they really weren't familiar with the research around career development, not just workforce development, creating jobs, career development, starting with the human. Who are you? What do you like to do? Where might you like to do it? Why do we leave the human out of the equation? Next slide, or you can build it out the whole thing. So we built our framework based on the most well-known career development frameworks. Theory, but mostly applied theory. And if you don't know Godfredson, or if you don't know Holland, which to me is shocking, and I'll share with you why in a moment, we're totally missing the boat. Next slide, please. So we had to start with building out a framework, an essential framework on, and we call it the mission of me. And essentially that every child in our district, this is what the superintendent and the board came to me, we need to build something, let's talk about equity. Every child, every grade, every year in our school district, 17,000 students, 27 schools, 900 plus teachers, starting with self-awareness for our children. Strengths, interests, and values. How is it that you do things? What do you like to do, and why? And then, of course, let's help them have that exposure. Back to that question, how does a child aspire to a career they don't know exists? And then the importance of every child being able to tell their story. Heather Whitley, the director of HR at Manpower, tells us regularly, we interview thousands of people. How often, and you can ask Mr. Blair about this, first question out of the box, tell me about yourself. How many of them can provide an answer to that question? If our children can't graduate without telling their story, we've missed the boat. Next slide, please. Once we had our framework, our core framework, the 3-core process, we had to identify how can we actually deliver this to all children. And the beauty of this is now 8 months in, I'm not just talking about something that doesn't exist. Your colleagues saw it this morning at our schools. I've been witnessing our schools, hundreds of classrooms, that every child will receive a level 1 experience of exploration. Every child will receive a level 2 experience called a simulation, where they're having an as-if experience. They'll have a level 3 experience, which we call Meet a Pro. Every child should be able to see that there's someone like them out in the world doing that work. And then 4, every child should have the chance to practice or a demonstration of learning. That's happening in our district, every child, every grade, every year. You can build out to the next slide. And we've had to create this process so that we can provide all children exposure. And I believe that was one of the answers of Raj Chetty when Mel Katz, Phil Blair's partner, asked him the question, how do we do this for children in those zip codes and in those districts? We need to provide them exposure so they can see what's possible. Many of the children in our district, and maybe your districts are the same, they don't leave their 5-mile radius. How do we provide them the exposure they need to see what's possible? And we call it Possible Selves. It's also the research of Daphne Oysterman from USC, who's been studying if a child can see their future possible self connected to their present self, there's a greater chance that they're going to stay in school. There's a greater chance that they're going to have higher performance in their core subjects. Next slide, please. Holland. Let's just talk about Holland for a second. Holland is the most researched of all career development typologies and frameworks. Holland, been around since the 60s. It's the core framework that we build our work on. He was a PhD at Johns Hopkins University. He created this typology. If you've heard the strong interest inventory, the results are revealed through Holland. Next slide, please. And Holland is what drives our career framework. So every child, every grade, every year is going to have experience in each of the RIASEC theme areas. We don't want children to start foreclosing. So often we provide a child a test or an assessment. Let's see what the answers are. Go and do that because that's who you are. No, we want children to experience each of the RIASEC theme areas, every child, every grade, and every year. So imagine that a kindergarten student who graduates in 8th grade in our district will have had 54 World of Work experiences. These careers are pulled from the strong interest inventory, the gold standard of career assessments. Are we telling these children that this is the job that they're going to have? No. But we want them to start understanding how their interests, how their personality connects to the world of work. And this is the way we can do it. Again, through that the 4 levels of framework. Exploration, simulation, Meet a Pro, and then practice, those demonstrations of learning. Next slide, please. I'm giving you a lot, but this is ASU GSV, right? You can handle this. So why do we care about interest? Well, interests have the highest correlation to career satisfaction, performance, and income. There's actually no correlation between strengths and careers. Although some of you may be using strengths in your districts, there is no correlation between strengths and careers. And we love Gallup Strengths Finder. We use it in our own district. But the correlation and the research, the longitudinal research, points back to interests having the highest correlation to career satisfaction, performance, and income. Research as early as 2017. Lots of students, like 20,000, all scored based on the RIASEC framework. That's why we care about interest. Imagine if we give a child the gift of graduating from high school knowing their interest themes. Might they make better choices around their education, educational plans, and careers for the future? Next slide, please. And I'll say how interesting that it is that Oklahoma State and Ohio State, they classify all their majors by Holland, the RIASEC. And is it interesting, too, that the ONET, the government's database of jobs, where the Bureau of Labor and Statistics pulls all their data, they classify all 900 plus careers by the RIASEC. So what are we missing? Because until our district, I don't think, and I'm sorry, I don't mean to be, I just haven't ever heard anyone talk about the RIASEC. And the strong interest inventory, which is the gold standard of career assessments, uses the RIASEC framework. So this is the work that we're doing because it's our job to prepare students for the future of work, the current world of work. And next slide, please. You can build it out if you don't mind. We have created all the resources in order to be able to do this work. And we understand it's difficult to do the work when you don't have the resources, but working with the University of San Diego, working with our amazing teachers and our educators that are here in this room, none of it would be possible without them. But we had to create all the resources to do this work so that every child could actually have the exposure and so that teachers would have the tools they need in order to do the work. Next slide. We've made all the tools digitally accessible as well. So certainly most of our documents, most of our work lives in Google Classrooms, which is fantastic because we have 18,000 Chromebooks in our school district. So our teachers can use the HyperDocs and deploy it quite seamlessly into the classroom. I'll leave it with the last slide because I see my time is wearing out. Next slide, please. And you can build it out. Nope, one back. Career development is a human process. And so often I find when I step into a classroom that's had, you name it, career development tool or technology, et cetera, it's not meant to be a playlist in a classroom rotation. It's meant to be a conversation experience between a teacher who has 180 days to develop a relationship with a child so they can understand and be reaffirmed in who they are, what they love to do, and where they might be able to do it. Don't leave career development to just a software in your classrooms or in your schools. It's not sufficient. And I think that's why where we are today. Employers don't have talent. 33% of employees in the United States say that they're engaged in their work. It doesn't work. And with globalization and Upwork and Fiverr, our children are competing with every other nation and talent in every other nation. If we don't help every child through a human process to discover who they are, what they like to be, and where they could do it, we're totally going to miss the boat in this next decade. Thank you.